Welcome back to the Cabin Podcast. I'm Andrea Belke, and this is a bonus podcast where we dive into different topics or areas of Wisconsin, as well as different organizations. Today, Megan is unfortunately not here, so I am riding solo, but it's okay because we have a full house in the cabin. We have a star-studded lineup of guests, in my opinion, here to talk about Badger Talks. So Badger Talks is a really unique way for people in Wisconsin to connect to different topics and connect with different speakers from University of Wisconsin-Madison. And here to talk more about it, I am joined by Fran Puleo Moyer. She is the Associate Director of Outreach Programs at UW Connects. So Badger Talks is one of those programs. And instead of me kind of describing what it all is, I'll just have Fran talk about it because you're an expert here. But also joining us, we have Mark Louden. He is Professor of Germanic at UW. He's also the Director of the Max Kade Institute. And with him being a Professor of Germanic, he's also at the Department of German, Nordic, and Slavic Plus. Did I say that all right, Mark?
Yeah, Germanic linguistics, actually. So it's
okay,
connected
perfect,
together.
perfect.
You bet. Yes, perfect.
Yes, sounds like a lot of really fascinating stuff that you do. And something that I'm really excited to talk about, we'll get there a little further in the podcast, but you do talks about the Amish presence in Wisconsin. And I think that's something that's always really fascinating. I know a lot of our listeners and viewers are going to be excited to hear about that. And then we also have Bridgitt Zielke, Site Director at the Wade House Historic Site and Wesley W. Young Carriage Museum. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, introductions are over. So I'm so excited. I know a lot of you have a lot of information about Badger Talks and kind of all the things that you bring to the table when it comes to connecting people in Wisconsin. So Fran, can you kind of start us out with just the elevator pitch? What is Badger Talks?
Yeah, so Badger Talks is technically the Speakers Bureau for the University of Wisconsin-Madison campus. But I like to think of it as a one-stop shop for people around the state to connect with campus in whatever way that's meaningful for them. And a lot of times with Badger Talks, it's through presentations, right? We have almost 600 faculty and staff signed up with Badger Talks, Mark being one of those. So we have one of our speakers here today representing Badger Talks. And there are over 30 categories listed on our website where folks can come search by keyword or by topic for a presenter that would be relevant for whatever event or gathering that they're hosting. And that could look like everything from a senior center talk to an employment training for a large company or a keynote conference presentation. So could look like a million different things.
What are some of the topics that speakers will come and talk about?
I mean, there's everything under the sun, from education topics to engineering topics, but then of course lots of arts and historical types of topics as well. One of our most popular talks right now is our former Vice Chancellor, Steve Ackerman, gives a fantastic talk about the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, which we're going to be diving into more later, I think, with you all, with the anniversary of that coming up. But a lot of historical, especially Wisconsin-related information, people are super interested in. And so he's giving talks all over the state. But of course, Amish culture, gardening types of talks, which we have a lot of extension folks that are participating in that. But then, of course, there's leadership trainings, HR-related trainings and talks that are given. And I'm really excited because we are now launching a set of musical ensembles that are going to be giving performances around the state. So Badger Talks is expanding. We've been growing by leaps and bounds. The last 3 years, we've seen 40% growth every year.
Wow,
so
40% growth. That's
it's
incredible.
a lot. And we have Maya Reinfeldt is our amazing Badger Talk coordinator who gives that concierge service to everybody who's looking for someone to enhance their event. And it's just been growing like crazy.
So how does it work? If anyone's listening and they want to have a Badger Talk at their organization or some event, how do they reach out?
Yeah, if you just go to the Badger Talks website, you can just Google Badger Talks, or it's badgertalks.wis.edu. And in there, you will see the catalog, which is easily searchable, and you can kind of refine who you're thinking of. And then there's a form that you just submit the form online, give us some information about your event, where it would be in the state. And then we ask that people list 2 or 3 speakers so that we can have like 100% chance of finding someone for the event. And we know everyone in Badger Talks is prepared to give presentations and they have their topics listed out there. So usually we're able to easily curate those connections just as long as we can find a date that's agreeable.
And is it all of the speakers or most of the speakers are connected to UW in some way?
All of them
Yeah.
have some kind of appointment with UW, whether it's staff, faculty, extension, adjunct teaching faculty, and even some graduate students and researchers.
That's incredible. Yeah. And it's cool to see how much it's grown and the fact that it's continuously expanding. More people are hearing about it. I want to jump in to you, Mark, because you're one of the speakers. So what are some of the talks that you like to facilitate in Wisconsin?
Sure. There are 2 main talks that I'm asked to present most frequently. One is the German presence in Wisconsin, which kind of gives an historical overview of the legacy of German-speaking migration to the state, which goes back, over almost 250 years now. It's a very, very long tradition. Wisconsin has the reputation, as many people know, as being the most German of the 50 U.S. states. One part of that is also the sort of latest chapter in the history of the German-speaking migration to the state, which is the Amish and traditional Mennonites. And then I do a number of presentations that are sort of standalone, focused on the Amish. Who are the Amish is the one that I do most frequently. But every presentation that I give is tailored to the specific venue, to the specific group. So there's a lot of different aspects that I'm interested in sharing with people, but I tailor it to the particular community that I'm going to be speaking to. So in some cases, when I talk about Amish related content to folks who are professionals, like say county public health workers or folks working in other sort of government agencies it's almost becomes like an in-service training for them on the cultural side, then obviously I'm talking about things that are more related to their practical interest in serving the Amish, as opposed to, say, members of a historical society or a senior citizens group or a church community, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I want to dive into that topic in particular, but Bridgitt, I also don't want to forget you too, because I have 3 people here, but I understand Mark's actually spoken at the Wade House, right?
He has. He joined us last April for our Friends of the Wade House annual meeting, and he gave his presentation that focused on the Germans in Wisconsin and did an excellent presentation. And that particular gathering at Wade House includes a potluck dinner. So he was scheduled to speak at 6:30 p.m., but he was gracious enough to arrive at 5:30 and join in the potluck dinner.
I mean, he heard potluck dinner, and I don't know how he could pass that up.
This was not a hard sell, I can tell you. It was a great dinner.
Right. But I noticed on the website for Badger Talks that it's meant to spark conversation on important topics. And I sat at the table he was at, and he certainly sparked conversation on the Germans in Wisconsin. And it was interesting for me to listen to him have conversations with the guest who came in to specifically listen to what he had to say.
And that's one of the beauties of Badger Talks, because it really is what we call the Wisconsin idea, right? And it's curating conversations that are important to entities, businesses, groups around the state. We basically just receive requests from everybody. So it's what is important to the community that we try to help curate. And we have Bridgitt as a host group, right? We call them host groups, and we have hundreds of them around the state that host these speakers. So really an important thing that you're here, and thank you for just talking about the program that way.
Well, we feel blessed to be able to use Badger Talk. So thank you for offering it. It's wonderful to have access to the UW Madison's staff and faculty and their expertise, and to be able to bring it out to the state of Wisconsin and not just have it in the city of Madison.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a really cool thing that you're able to expand into all of Wisconsin and then really connect people. Are you all from Wisconsin originally?
I'm not. I'm from the Chicago area.
No, that's
been
okay.
Here,
We still love
been
you.
here 30 years.
I am. I grew up in Cuba City, Wisconsin.
Okay.
And moved to Sheboygan County about 23 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm a native of Minneapolis, so relatively, close to Wisconsin. My wife is from Coon Valley, Wisconsin. She went to high school in Westby, so I've got sort of ties through the family there. But I've lived here for 25 years, so I've lived in Wisconsin longer than anywhere else in my life.
Well, and can I advocate for myself? I have lived in Wausau, Eau Claire, and Beaver Dam for multiple years of my life too. So I do feel Wisconsin is very much home.
You're a Wisconsinite. Don't worry, we're not doubting you. But I do love that, you have chosen to make Wisconsin your home, and this program is just so deeply Wisconsin, which I really love. Mark, kind of diving into your topic as well, what kind of drew you to speaking about the Amish presence in Wisconsin?
It's a great question. So I myself am a Mennonite, and Mennonites and Amish are related very in terms of our spiritual heritage. I also speak Pennsylvania Dutch, which is the main everyday language, the first language of Amish people. So it's the first language that children acquire before they start school. And for several years, I've served as a volunteer interpreter, especially in medical situations for Amish and traditional Mennonites, conservative Mennonites who also speak Pennsylvania Dutch. And my work, again, it's all volunteer work, has expanded into what I call kind of cultural mediation and kind of explaining to outsiders who the Amish and traditional Mennonites are, and especially dispelling a lot of misunderstandings and stereotypes, sometimes negative views that outsiders have. On the flip side, I actually do presentations, not through Badger Talks, but to Amish and Mennonite communities themselves to kind of help explain sort of how the rest of society works and how outside agencies work, and kind of serve as a sort of an informal, as I say, intermediary or consultant.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's really interesting and fascinating to talk about the different myths that people have. And if you two also have questions as well, we can kind of have our own little Badger Talk here. But I am curious, what do you think are the biggest misconceptions, and what are the things that you like to bring to your talks when you go around the state?
That's a great question. I'd say probably the biggest misunderstanding that people have is that the Amish are kind of clueless about how the rest of society works. And one thing that I've realized over time in working, thinking about other minority cultures, both ethnic and religious and social cultures within American society, find that folks that maintain a certain amount of distance between themselves and the social mainstream typically understand the mainstream better than the mainstream understands them. Mm-hmm. And so the Amish are a lot savvier about how they interact with mainstream society than a lot of people kind of give them credit for.
Yeah, and there's a big Amish presence in Wisconsin. I think it's the 4th in the country, right?
Yes. So out of 33 U.S. states, we're 4th. Wisconsin has the 4th largest Amish population. That's correct.
Where are the places in Wisconsin that you'll see the most Amish?
Most are concentrated in the sort of central western part of the state.
Okay.
So there are relatively few communities in the eastern part of the state, although near Elkhart Lake, there's a community up there, and then toward Shawano County near Bonduel, so not that far from Green Bay. In the southeastern part of the state, in that kind of Milwaukee-Chicago corridor, there are none. But the largest community, I would say, or largest numbers are probably in Vernon and Clark counties. So in that sort of southwestern and central western parts.
Mark, you had mentioned that you're fluent in Pennsylvania Dutch also. So when you're addressing these communities, are you speaking that language?
Yes, exclusively in Pennsylvania Dutch.
Okay, so that language is robust and alive
Absolutely.
in those communities.
It's a robust language. And get this, it is the fastest growing group. I mean, the Amish are the fastest growing group of human beings on the planet, not just in the United States. Their population is doubling every 20 years, which means that the Pennsylvania Dutch language is doubling its native speaker numbers at exactly the same rate. That is extremely exceptional among languages around the world. Most small languages or languages that are spoken by minority populations, like, for example, indigenous languages, including here in Wisconsin, like Menominee and Ojibwe, those are endangered, right? Because of the pressure to shift towards speaking English only. But the Amish have discovered the sort of secret of being able to maintain bilingualism, not just over a couple of generations, but now 12 generations after their ancestors migrated here. So
and that must be very intentional for them. That's a goal.
It is.
Right?
It's a goal.
Yeah.
The language maintenance is not the direct goal. It's basically a kind of spiritual maintenance, which at the heart of which is kind of maintaining a certain amount of distance between themselves and the mainstream society. But language goes along with it.
This is a little sidetrack, but I was just up at the Menominee Nation, and saw their Menominee U, which is their language school,
Mm-hmm.
and they are quickly revitalizing it as well, which was really nice to see.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And more efforts like that to support endangered languages, especially indigenous languages in the United States and Canada, is absolutely essential.
Mm-hmm.
So the Amish population is growing at a really fast rate. Why is that, do you think?
So they have on average between triple and quadruple the US and Canadian averages for children per family. So they have on average between 6 and 7 children. The vast majority of those children are born healthy. Their moms survive childbirth, which was not a given 200 years ago. And they have about an 85 to 90% retention rate, which means that 85 to 90% of children who are born to Amish parents make the decision as young adults to formally join the church. So no one is born Amish, in the same way that no one is actually born Christian. So being a Christian is not a birthright. Amish and Mennonite churches, we practice what's known as believer's baptism, which means that we don't baptize infants. So we leave it up to the person, the individual, to make their own decision about whether they want to formally enter into that covenant and to join the church. And so in Amish and Mennonite churches, the age at which most people decide to formally join the church is somewhere around 18, 19 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then in terms of modern technology, is it the same with Mennonite and Amish? Are there any differences? Are you really not using any modern technology? Can you kind of break that down?
Sure. Technology is one area of question that a lot of people have. The Amish they don't reject technology. They set limits on technology. In the same way that those of us who have children set limits on technology typically with our kids. So we say we're limiting screen time, right? The Amish are making similar decisions, except it's not just simply parents to children, it's community-wide in sort of a democratic way. You asked about the question, are there differences in the acceptance of technology between Amish and Mennonites? Yes, but even within the Amish, there are about 40 different subgroups, all of which are distinguished not by basic faith or theology. The religion is the same, and really the basic doctrines of the religion are the same between Amish and Mennonites. It's really just questions about everyday, how you practice your faith in everyday life, and to what extent you accept certain aspects of technology or not. That's part of it.
And I'll add that he had mentioned there is a population near Elkhart Lake. We are blessed to tap into their horse driving skills. So the Wade House Historic Site presents the world of horsepower, and we transport our guest from our visitor center back in time with a horse-drawn wagon ride to the historic core where we have the stagecoach inn, the blacksmith shop, and the sawmill. It's very hard to find people who have that skill of driving horses and wagons. So the person we hire from May through November to provide that transportation, horse-drawn transportation at Wade House, then hires Amish drivers who have those skills and grow up with that skill. So we're very pleased to be able to work with them.
That's incredible, and it must be really, really fun for you to see people come to the Wade House and be brought back into history. What is that experience like for you?
It is, and I think being able to do it via horse-drawn wagon ride is a perfect way of saying, hey, we're stepping away from today and we're going back to 1850 to see a stagecoach inn that was constructed for people to step into after they had been on a 6-hour ride from Sheboygan to Greenbush, and to get a feel for the hospitality that would have been offered to them, the beverages that would have been served in the tap room, some fresh lemonade or maybe a stronger beverage if you were of the right age and sex. The meals, the noontime meals that Betsy Wade was known for. And then the sleeping accommodations, how different they are than today's hotel rooms. But we also then can show people the skills of blacksmithing. And we have a reproduction sawmill that has an up and down muley saw. And we have tradesmen in those spaces demonstrating those skills. So people do truly get transported back in time and understand the world of horsepower, how important horses were to the economics of the day.
I mean, honestly, sometimes in modern day, when I look at the stresses of social media and everything, you kind of wonder, wait, wouldn't it be nice if we all just went back in time? I mean, do you feel like I'm so curious of your perspective and yours as well, since you kind of work in this line of history and everything. Do you think that the Amish, and I mean, are they doing it right? Do they have this idea, they see the outside world and they kind of realize, you know what, I think it's better if we have these principles that have really kind of stood the test of time? Is that kind of how you see it?
Absolutely. That's absolutely right. This year is interesting. This is the 500th anniversary of the larger religious movement of which the Amish are one part. It's referred to as the Anabaptist movement, which began in 1525 in the spirit of the Reformation in Zurich, Switzerland. And I was in Zurich actually for a huge gathering of Mennonites and Amish and related groups at the end of May. And what was very, very interesting was that historians would say that, going back 500 years ago, the spiritual ancestors of Amish and Mennonites never would have anticipated probably that there would be folks, assisting, a historical society in Wisconsin to talk about, how things were in this country 100, 150 years ago.
Yeah. When we interact with people that are Amish, Mennonite, especially if you're meeting them at the Historical Society, I mean, what are your tips for interacting with the Amish if you see them out and about?
Amish people are very social. They're very, very friendly. They're very much into getting to know people on a first name basis. And they also appreciate when people share about their own lives and their own family situations. I've seen this frequently in the hospital setting, for example, where the parents of, say, a pediatric patient feel much more comfortable with providers if the nurse, or ideally the doctor, sits down and kind of shares a little bit about whether they have kids, for example, themselves, or share their first name. Nurses do a good job of that, for example. And it's something that makes healthcare providers a little bit uncomfortable sometimes because of privacy regulations and kind of maintaining a certain amount of distance. But Amish are very social people. And part of that comes from the fact that if you have on average, say, 5 or 6 siblings in your family, there's not a whole lot of private space. And as a community, there's not a whole lot of private space, which they view in a very positive light, especially as they get older, because they feel that the community has their back. Even if they themselves were, say, never married or didn't have kids or something like that, they don't have to worry that their needs will not be met and that people will not show love and affection for them as they get older, because that's just what you do. And that's what you did in traditional societies as well. Before, there was a social net to take care of people, your families and your larger community looked after you.
Are you able to interact with the Amish in Wisconsin, especially kind of informing your speeches?
Absolutely. I mean, I do. I attend Amish and traditional Mennonite worship services. I mentioned before, I'm actually a member of a Mennonite church, Madison Mennonite Church right here. And I have a lot of personal interactions, and I especially appreciate the social gatherings, that to be able to spend time with families and especially play with kids and that sort of thing. So I spend a lot of my kind of downtime with Amish folks.
It must be a cool experience for you to, organize this and see what effects his talks have on people, because you're learning so much. And it is a really unique experience to be able to learn about the Amish, something that, we know a little bit about, but you always have questions about.
It's really all about these connections. I know faculty are doing all sorts of work outside of Badger Talks. I'd be crazy to think it's we're the one, but it's just a vehicle for people to tap in if they don't have another avenue. And seeing this type of connection is amazingly heartwarming. And I just know that this is happening in all sorts of ways. And I was thinking back, actually, Mark, the last time you and I connected was during the pandemic, because you gave what we were calling a Badger Talk Live. And we were doing pre-recorded talks because, as you can imagine, when the pandemic hit, we canceled hundreds of talks all over the state. And from my kitchen, we ended up going live on YouTube and Facebook and recording all of these talks, which has now morphed into a pre-recorded talks series called Badger Talk Quick Picks. And so we have hundreds of quick picks out on YouTube and on Facebook. Mark's talk about the Amish is out there as well, if people want to check that out. And we've had over 1.5 million impressions on Facebook in a given year. So it definitely was getting a lot of traction. We had great interaction during the pandemic, especially people really engaging which was really fun. And now we're doing sort of quicker, short blasts of pre-recorded talks. And we have our own podcast. We have a Badger Talk podcast with host Buzz Kemper.
Nice.
And so, so it's really morphed into these other things. And Badger Talks as a brand, because of its popularity, has just kind of continued to grow. So as an example of that, we just recently launched Badgers on Tap. And so we have a partnership with about 30 pubs around the state in every location. And the pubs have said, send us your speakers and we'll promote them in the pub. And so we send teams of 2 or 3 faculty grad students that go and present. Astronomy is a popular topic, but we just sent a psychology group. And they go, and there's trivia and bingo and flash talks and a lot of pub activities.
That's so fun. Have you spoken at a pub?
Not yet. No.
It's coming.
Public libraries, more my
I see what you did there. Do people get to ask questions after the speech or
That's
the talk?
the best part.
Yeah.
I like to set aside a good half hour and sometimes 45 minutes and for questions and answers. And oftentimes I'll linger just to sort of chat with people afterward. I think the questions that people have, that's the most important aspect of things. And that's the real advantage to doing something live and in person, right? Is to have that those personal connections. And in some cases, I've been to small communities like Plum City, Wisconsin, which, has, hundreds, just in the few hundreds of residents. And that public library is the cultural center, right? And in many cases, I could be the first representative of the University of Wisconsin-Madison who's coming into the community to talk. And I just am so grateful for the curiosity and the warm welcome that I get at these venues, especially in the smaller towns.
Okay, since you do answer questions at the end, I want to ask a few rapid fire questions about the Amish. And some of these could be stupid, but a lot of times
There's
no dumb
such
questions,
thing. There's
right?
no such thing as a stupid
Thank
question.
Thank you. I appreciate you. But just kind of a couple questions that come to my mind, and everyone else can kind of chime in too. Gavin, you're also allowed to chime in if you have any questions. But I'm curious, in terms of modern technology, is it no cars in Amish?
They don't own or operate their own motor-driven vehicles. They ride in them.
Okay.
But they use horse and buggy for local transportation. But if they're going larger distances, they hire private drivers, or there are what they call Amish taxi services, which are typically often retired people that have, say, a 15-passenger van, and will take a group of Amish people to, say, Walmart or Costco, or maybe to Madison for healthcare.
Or to Wade House to drive carriages.
That's true. That's true. What are the main jobs that they have?
Great question. Historically, not surprisingly, they were mostly involved in agriculture, but that started to change about 1970 as the challenges sort of facing small-scale farming affected Americans generally, not just simply the Amish. And so now really only a minority of families depend on agriculture as their main source of income. So say like dairy farming in Wisconsin, most are small business people. And so in Wisconsin, it's very common to do things that have something to do with wood. So like say cabinet making, furniture making. There are a lot of home remodeling businesses, carpentry businesses. A lot of women have craft stores, run garden centers, so like nursery centers, which are obviously very, very busy from like Mother's Day on. And there are diverse ways that they support themselves economically. At the end of the day, they still live in rural areas. And so they have some pretty serious gardens, which are both for their kind of own, family health needs, but sometimes they also sell produce as a side business.
My grandpa would always drive hours and hours and hours to get Amish furniture. I mean, he swore by it, and it was the best furniture around.
For sure. I have a quick question. With the agriculture piece, were the Amish not embracing maybe like chemical suppression of weeds and bugs, and that's why they maybe couldn't keep up with or what was the reasoning?
The main reasoning was competition from corporate farming.
Okay.
That corporate farming can, do anything on a large scale, it's cheaper, right? For businesses that are purchasing, say, eggs or dairy products or something like that. Mm-hmm. That's the first reason that there was the challenge. But what they've discovered, those that still do farming, and even if farming is a sideline, they've discovered niche farming. And so actually many are getting into organic farming. Mm-hmm. In Organic Valley, I'm not doing a plug here, but Organic Valley, which is based in Lafarge, Wisconsin, does an amazing job of sort of making it economically viable for Amish farmers to go organic and to make a living doing it.
Wow.
Nice. Love it.
As far as cell phone goes, do they have phones?
They don't have landlines. They all have access to either typically community phones, or it could be phones from a neighbor. Many small business owners will have a flip phone for business purposes, and especially carpenters and those are working on, say, roofing crews or something that are kind of traveling around. It's pretty much necessary to have a cell phone, but they don't have smartphones.
So then not really access to social media.
No, they avoid social media. Rarely some businesses will partner with a non-Amish person to sort of say, sell some of their products over a website, but social media is an absolute no-go. And kids have not just limited screen time, but zero screen time. And one of the there are many benefits from that. One of the health benefits is that they get an incredible amount of exercise. We all talk about sort of like aiming for 10,000 steps a day. Amish are getting between 17 and 19,000 steps a day.
I was going to say, I feel like they're probably maybe happier than the average person, right?
That's how they identify themselves. They know, they don't live cut off from the rest of society. They don't live in colonies. They live in immediate proximity to non-Amish people. And they know what life is like on the other side of the fence. And that's why so many young people make the decision to formally join the church and remain with the community.
I do have a question too. So you talked about small businesses, and usually a lot of these small businesses use like digital tools, not only for marketing, but to also use like for capital and organizing their taxes and stuff like that. Do they have people that they hire to do things like that, or do they really forego all the digital tools that help you do things like that?
That's a great question. They typically themselves, they do forego the digital tools. Those that have fairly complex financial profiles will just simply work with an accountant to take care of their taxes, which is true for a lot of us, or a lot of small business owners as well. But they really don't have much in the way of web presence at all. They would have business cards and they would advertise in print media, but a lot of their commercial success is due to word of mouth. So they do things like, for example, like how many people can you find who can shoe a horse, right? Or recently I was helping a historical society in Lebanon, Wisconsin, which is just to the east of Watertown, an unincorporated community. And the historical society had received an old Surrey wagon carriage as a donation, and they were looking for somebody to refurbish it, to put in their museum. Who can do it? Well, I put them in touch with a guy in Kingston, Wisconsin, where there's just north of Madison, where there's a large Amish community, and he builds buggies new, but he also reconditions buggies from the 1880s. And it was fantastic, and the price was right. They don't look to make a huge excessive profit at things, and so everybody's happy.
Was it the Surrey with the fringe on top?
Was
Was everybody thinking that?
That's the first thing I thought of too when they said, we've got a Surrey. And I'm thinking, with a fringe on top?
And I have another question. Does Rumspringa happen with the Amish in Wisconsin?
So that's a great question. Rumspringa is probably the most misunderstood aspect of Amish culture.
Okay.
And even Wikipedia gets it wrong. So the stereotype is that young people, when they turn 16 or 17 years old, or in some cases, it's believed that their parents send them out into the world to sort of explore things, maybe sow their wild oats, and then sort of discern whether they want to, quote unquote, come back to the community or not. That's not actually how it works. Rumspringa does mean literally running around, which does kind of convey a little bit of wildness to it. It just simply means that when you turn 16 or 17, depending on your community, you have crossed a certain threshold such that you are able to socialize with other young people without adult supervision and date. That's all it is. And the vast majority of Amish youth do not sow their wild oats, do not party, go wild. We can all reflect back to our high school years, and there was always maybe that 5% or whatever of our high school class that were a little bit more on the rebellious side. That's true in larger Amish communities as well, but it's very rare. And specifically in Wisconsin, because there are a lot of communities here, but most of the communities are relatively small. And so that kind of herd mentality that you get in, say, at large universities or large high schools, that kind of thing, you can find that a little, the sort of wild behavior, rebellious behavior in larger communities in places like Ohio, Pennsylvania, Indiana, but it's very unusual.
Oh, and then we talked about that there's a large Amish presence here, but we didn't really say how many. If you had a kind of estimate about how many Amish people are in Wisconsin, what would that be?
It's about 28,000.
Oh,
So
okay. Oh, 28,000?
28,000.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that's
28,000.
way more than I thought.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Because originally I was thinking, okay, I had no idea how many Amish people there were, and I would imagine it'd be harder to date if you're in these really small communities, but that's not really an issue if there's
No.
28,000 people.
And there's actually a lot of mobility. A lot of communities, communities may be small, but they have a lot of connections to folks, relatives, friends in other communities. So they actually travel quite a bit. If anybody ever rides the Amtrak, I can pretty much guarantee you will see Amish people on it as well.
And so is it kind of how it was before modern technology like the phone? Are they writing letters?
Yes.
Yes, they're writing a lot of letters.
Yes, they're writing a lot of letters. There are also 2 national newspapers that are produced by outsiders based in Pennsylvania and Ohio that serve Amish communities, and it consists mainly of just simply long letters/reports from individual communities just talking about, the weather and how things are going and who visited whom. And so they actually, and that's a weekly newspaper. And so they're getting, hundreds of reports from other communities just delivered to their mailbox every week. And so the Amish grapevine is pretty successful.
Hey, Mark, are there a lot of centenarians in Amish culture? Like people live
Yes.
really, really long
So
lives.
Amish have had very, very high longevity in American society since records were being kept, which goes back to the colonial era. A lot of it has to do with, it's basically a blend in any human population of good genes, but also healthy lifestyle. And one thing I mentioned something about, as people get older and that everybody has their back, there are no Amish people that go into retirement communities or nursing facilities. Even if they have very extreme medical needs, they will be cared for at home. And that, one thing that is actually not just simply a social problem, but a medical problem in American society is loneliness, right? We read about this a lot, that older folks who, are just suffering because they don't have folks to look after them. And that's not an issue in Amish society, but that wasn't an issue in, general society, again, 100, 150 years ago. That's just how communities in America used to be.
Yeah, speaking of loneliness and getting out with your community, what are some of the fun community events that they do?
So the classic sort of fun event where people get together is a barn raising, right? So if a family needs or wants a new barn, they can basically put the better part of that barn up in a single day. Things like quilting bees, work parties of various kind, depends on the time of the year. It could be like, say, a harvesting party of some kind. But basically, they typically incorporate work into play. And so most work is not individual, it's collective, it's communal. So for example, it's very interesting. This is kind of explains how they interact with technology. So every Amish family has a washing machine, a motor-powered washing machine, because the alternative from having a water-powered washing machine is like taking a washboard down to the creek. And that's an individual activity. And so they say you're not taking away from sort of community life by, motorizing, the laundering of dirty clothes. But no Amish family has a dishwasher, because the act of washing dishes, if you consider going from clearing the table to scraping to washing to rinsing to drying to putting away, you can incorporate a half dozen people, including, say, small kids. And what are you doing during that time? You are singing, you are laughing, you're joking, you're splashing water on each other, you're telling stories. And they say it would take away from that fun community time if I just put all my dishes in a dishwasher and pushed a button.
How do we all become Amish?
Yeah.
Like, how do you sign up?
Could you just at any point want to join an Amish community? What's the process like?
So it's something that they don't encourage, because, as they'll say, on a practical level, it's much easier for them to go into the mainstream and gain things like certain aspects of technology than for folks who have grown up with certain aspects of technology to give them up. That being said, there's no prohibition on it. It's just something that's very, very rare. Across the United States and Canada, there's somewhere around 460,000 Amish people, of whom probably maybe 200 to 300 were not born to Amish parents. So it's unusual. Going back 100 years ago is much more common, because the differences, outward differences between Amish and non-Amish were very few. And so, everybody looked more or less the same. They had the same sort of technological possessions. It's really only in the 20th century that the Amish, on kind of a technological and sort of lifestyle level, have diverged fairly dramatically from the rest of society.
Yeah, I was going to say, is there a decade or a year that they kind of base where they stop engaging with modern technology? How do they make those rules?
No, they change all the time.
Okay. Is it like a committee or?
Let me tell you, the only time that I have ever seen a 3D printer actually in operation is at an Amish factory in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. And this was a factory where they had 13 machines producing precision parts for kerosene lanterns. And the reason that they created this little mini factory for these precision parts is because the company that had been producing them for Coleman or some other lantern company went out of business. And so they said, we need to do this ourselves. And they figured out, they're very savvy when it comes to technology, to basically hacking in a good sense, hack these systems such that you don't have to run them on electricity, because they don't get electricity from the grid. However, everybody uses generators. And so they figured out how they could do it with self-generated power to operate these 13 digital 3D printers.
Wow. And then the clothing, right? So clearly it looks like it's from a bygone era, right? And I'm sure that's intentional.
That is intentional. Yeah. Part of it is the sort of uniformity of dress. And not everybody wears exactly the same thing, but the uniformity of dress is part of a larger principle that, for example, you with your Badger Talks t-shirt are exemplifying here, which is that we identify our affiliations and our connections with larger groups of people through our dress. So wearing uniforms or wearing graphic, sweatshirts or t-shirts where we say something like, University of Wisconsin, Madison, or Green Bay Packers, that kind of thing. So it's kind of a team building aspect to it, which they view it that way. In general, the principle is to dress modestly and practically. So I'll give you a very, very, simple example. If you're a woman and you're married and you are blessed with children, you are probably going to be being pregnant and giving birth about 6 or 7 times in your lifetime. If you had 2 entirely separate sets of clothing, that would get a little bit unhandy. And so what they do is they have dresses that are easily expanded, depending on where you are, by using straight pins. And part of the specific aspects of that style really go back to, in some cases, the 18th century, when this is how all women dressed, right? Certain things that were taken over directly from the people that invited them to Pennsylvania to begin with in the colonial era, who were the Quakers. So if you kind of, imagine the Quaker Oats guy on the box, he looks a little bit Amish in some ways. Certain aspects of Amish dress actually go back to the Quakers 300 years
That's
ago.
impressive. And like walking around with straight pins all in your dress when you're pregnant.
Yeah.
I don't know that I would.
I've given more than a few rides to Amish folks, and I have to check the back seat sometimes to make sure that some of those straight pins haven't found their way into the seats.
Oh boy.
Before we move on, I could ask you questions all day about the Amish because this is so fascinating. But what's your favorite Amish tradition?
I would say it's not so much a specific, say, like annual tradition as just simply the practice of hospitality. So I don't feel like I need to have called or written in advance to say that I'm going to drop in for dinner and feel like I'm imposing. So not that long ago, I was up in Eau Claire County, and I hadn't planned on this, but I had dropped my wife off for doing a bike ride with her cousin, and I was kind of taking a long way back to Madison. And there was a family that lives outside of Fairchild, Wisconsin, which is near Osseo. And I thought, this is about dinner time. I think they would be happy to see me. The kids are a lot of fun to sort of hang out with. And I never felt like I was, maybe going to be a burden or imposition, or like I should have picked up pizzas in advance. And so I showed up there like at 5 o'clock or something. And the kid said, "And of course you're staying for dinner, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah, of course, And I think that sort of welcome mat always being open is something that is probably the most appealing to me.
What does it mean to you to be able to share all this knowledge with people through Badger Talks?
I love community interaction. And this is now my 38th year as a faculty member at a university. I taught for 12 years at the University of Texas at Austin before I got my dream job at UW-Madison. And in my graduate training, public-facing outreach was not something that we were schooled in, right? We were basically taught to do research and to train as teachers and that sort of thing. And really, when I came to UW-Madison, and this is not just simply, a statement that people make, but it's something that is actually lived. It's a lived value at our institution. And I would say across the universities of Wisconsin is the Wisconsin idea. The idea that what we do within the university should bring some kind of general benefit to the larger community. Mm-hmm. And I'm very grateful for the fact that my administrators really, support that value. And now, as I, kind of move into maybe the last decade or so of my career at UW-Madison, my outreach work is probably the most satisfying that I do. And I love doing research and I love teaching, but just getting out into the community and meeting people. And it also has benefits for me as a teacher, right? When I'm, called on by people to answer questions that I didn't anticipate, that primes me very well for the kinds of interactions that go on in my classroom.
Yeah. Have you ever been asked a question where it stumps you?
Oh, sure. And the same thing with my students, which is like, I will get back to you. Here's my card and we can email, or here's my phone number or something. I've actually maintained personal connections with folks that I've met at these events, including with Badger Talks. And, where, people say, I'd like to sort of stay in touch, or, people have recommended that I talk to somebody else, or they meet somebody that has a question. It could be related to their professional lives or something. And so it's this kind of wonderful web of connections that is facilitated by doing public-facing outreach through Badger Talks.
As we talk about engagement and commitment to outreach, I mean, Mark obviously is a huge example of that at its perfect state. But that is typical for a lot of our faculty that are speaking through Badger Talks. Our average attendance for talks is about 46 people, so it's not a small audience, but that doesn't mean we don't send a faculty member to Spooner and there are 3 people that come for a talk. And I can't tell you the number of faculty that have said, I had the most incredible conversation with those 3 people for an hour, and we learned a lot about each other. So every engagement is really, really meaningful. And just talking about Amish culture is just one example of like the millions of things in Badger Talks that people are engaging on and learning about. And it's just, it's an incredible testament to the Wisconsin idea. And because of the popularity of presentations, we're expanding, as I mentioned, into performances, but now also workshops. We're probably going to be adding consulting as a possibility. So the portfolio of offerings is going to continue to grow as long as there's this need in the state. So.
Yeah, I want to pivot to you, Bridgitt, a little bit. Did we miss anything, or is there anything
No.
else you'd want to add?
You covered a lot of ground.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so happy that I was able to pick your brain on all of that. But you had kind of mentioned just different ways, Fran, that people can, experience these Badger Talks. I'm curious. I know a lot of times it's maybe different companies or organizations. Is there something that if someone's just watching, or if it's someone like me and I'm like, hey, I want to go watch a talk about the Amish, I mean, am I able to go?
Yeah, 100%. So on the Badger Talks website, there's like a public events tab, upcoming events. And so you can see every public event that's coming up through Badger Talks around the state there. So okay. I would just check it out and see like if there's something coming up in your area. We're working on a mapping tool, which is coming here shortly, where someone could go and actually filter in the map by their location to see what's near them. We aren't quite there yet, but for now there's this big list of public events. And follow on Facebook because we're constantly posting all the events coming up there as well.
Well, you can go on that, mapping thing and look up the Wade House. But we had kind of talked a little bit about Wade House already, but I'm curious just as an overview for people that have never heard of it, how would you describe the Wade House?
The Wade House, we are one of 12 historic sites and museums of the Wisconsin Historical Society. We opened in 1953, and the cornerstone of the property is the Wade House Stagecoach Inn, which was built by Betsy and Sylvanus Wade. But it's grown over the years. As I had mentioned earlier, we have a sawmill, we have a blacksmith shop, and we have a wonderful carriage museum, the Wesley W. Young Carriage Museum, which has more than 80 hand-drawn and horse-drawn vehicles that mostly were created in Sheboygan County, so manufactured by the Young Carriage Company in Sheboygan, and they were all preserved by a young family member who had grown up working in the carriage factory, but the automobile was introduced in the early 1900s and the carriage company closed, but his love for carriages never ended. So when he had some disposable income, he actually went to the UW-Madison, got an accounting degree, made some money, and took that extra money and started buying these vehicles that his relatives had constructed, and he restored them and gifted them to the Wisconsin Historical Society in the 1960s. So if you're in Sheboygan County, I highly recommend stopping by. I feel we're a hidden gem in Sheboygan County, but again, we're one of 12 historic sites and museums that are owned and operated by the Wisconsin Historical Society. Besides coming for a daily visit, we do have programs and events on an annual basis, and Mark came and spoke as part of our annual meeting for our Friends group, but we have a lecture series, which is titled Timeless Tales, and we actually had another speaker from Badger Talks present in February. Her name was Cecil Schrader, and she spoke on dugout canoes. So I think the title was Wood to Watercraft, Wisconsin's Dugout Canoes. And she's conducting a survey with a member of the staff of the Wisconsin Historical Society, Tamara Thompson, on all of the dugout canoes in the state of Wisconsin. And when she spoke in February, I know it was over 100 dugout canoes that have been identified and recorded in their survey. But again, an example of a different topic that the University of Wisconsin faculty has expertise on. So we're just so grateful that we can choose from their catalog of speakers for our Timeless Tale speaker series for the Wade House Friends annual meeting. And I must say, I also worked for another organization, and when I worked there, I tapped into Badger Talks and was introduced to Badger Talks for the first time when I worked at the Kohler Foundation, which is a foundation that was created by Kohler family members in 1940, and they focus on arts and education. So for my Arts at the Walderhaus programming, we used Badger Talks to bring in a professor of trombone. He actually did a performance with a local piano trio, Mr. Chair. And again, it just shows the broad range of opportunities host facilities can get when they choose to use Badger Talks.
I really do think the Wade House is a hidden gem because I hate to admit that I grew up in Sheboygan County and didn't know about it. So to me, that's a hidden gem because how have I not known about it really?
I'm not sure. We're working on our public relations skills and we're here generating awareness. But I was wondering if perhaps when you were in fourth grade as a random student, if you had toured, because most of the time what we hear from our guests when they come to Timeless Tales or they come to a program like Mark spoke at, they'll say, oh, we haven't been here since fourth grade. So going back to the programs we do at Wade House, we're trying to provide fresh opportunities that really create interesting opportunities for guests to want to come back, right? So we have Wade House carriage driving days. If you're interested in carriages, you can see them moving on the property. It's a carriage competition.
Oh, wait, tell me more about the carriage competition.
It's always in July, and we this past July had 40 competitors who were competing in the brand new Wade House horse arena, and they're judged on their reinsmanship, their ability to communicate with the horse, their turnout, how does their dress, their carriage match their horses. There's a cross-country path, and there's an optimal time for them to reach, but they took a 2-mile path across our property. There are obstacle courses. They have to drive between cones that have weighted balls resting on the top, and they can't knock those balls off or they lose points. But that's an event that we always have in July.
Is that typically Amish people participating?
No, Amish are competing, but they are driving our guests from the visitor center to the competition
I feel like
areas.
If the Amish competed, they would blow everyone
They would probably.
Actually, I should say there is our clinician. So right before this carriage driving competition, we have a carriage driving clinic, and our clinician for the last 2 years is actually a former Amish person. I guess that's how I would term it. Yeah. His name is Joe Yoder, and he's very skilled in driving horses. Actually, he was with Kohler Company. He was the director of carriage driving for their stables, and he worked with Herbert V. Kohler Jr. When he went to driving competitions. And so we have a special, Wade House has a special connection with the Kohler family because Ruth DeYoung Kohler and her sister-in-law Marie Christine Kohler saved the Wade House in the late 1940s and gifted it to the Wisconsin Historical Society. So that family has remained involved. But anyway, so yes, there is some Amish competing and teaching at Wade House. Another event we have is an arts and crafts fair, which we just had this past weekend, which brings vendors in, and then our guests can see the site, but also shop for special wares. But again, we're trying to provide opportunities for people to come back again after their 4th grade field trip visit to be involved in Wade House. And actually tonight we have a pizza party at Wade House with a local, and maybe you know him, his name is Frank Marzano. He's pretty well known in Sheboygan County. He goes into people's homes and throws pizza parties, but he's blessed Wade House. He comes out 3 times in the summer and hosts a pizza party. So,
well, that's incredible. So you have events throughout the year, and also you can come in and do a daily visit, right?
Yes.
About how much time would you allow for people if they're coming to do a day visit?
Well, if you're like me and you read every museum label, maybe 4 hours. But on average, I would say leave yourself 2 to 3 hours to enjoy the entire site.
Yeah. Well, I want to respect all of your time because I know that we have places to go at some point. But anything else you want to include about the Wade House or what you do?
I would say come and visit if you have not only the Wade House, but all of the other 11 historic sites and museums of the Wisconsin Historical Society. We really all present different stories, important stories that we want conversations to be had about.
Yeah. And Fran, anything else that you think we should quick hit on?
Yeah, sure. I think the only other thing worth mentioning is that the majority of faculty and staff in Badger Talks donate their time, or it's part of their whole faculty or staff assignment at UW to do this outreach and engage in outreach. There is a small percentage, 5% or less, that will charge for talks. And that's usually a scenario of maybe it being a conference keynote that's going to require an inordinate amount of preparation, or maybe a large corporation wanting someone to come and give a training. But generally speaking, the majority of people do this just because they believe in the Wisconsin idea.
It's amazing. How can people, is there anything you want to plug? Like, how could people find the Wade House? Is there social media? Is there a website?
Absolutely. We have a well-designed website. It's wadehouse.org. We also are on Facebook and Instagram. And please check us out. We're open during the main season, May through the beginning of November, and we're open Wednesdays through Sundays during that time from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. In the winter, we're open on Saturdays.
And then what about you, Mark? Do you want people trying to reach out or find you on the Badger Talks website?
Yeah, actually, I want to make a plug for like how you can connect with organizations that may have an interest in connecting with Badger Talks, because there are a lot of, like public libraries, historical societies, various kinds of interest groups that are often looking for speakers and often have limited budgets. And Badger Talks is a fantastic resource for these organizations to reach out and bring folks like me who are just thrilled at the idea of going to New Richmond, Wisconsin, Cadott, probably where your roots are.
Random Lake?
Well, Freistadt.
We'll see you actually. Freistadt, yeah. Yeah, well, we'll see you at the public library.
Hey.
And Fran, any last words, or you just plug the site one more time for everybody?
Yeah, sure. badgertalks.wisc.edu. You can also email us with any questions. Happy to help. And my team and I always feel we have the best job on campus because we get to work with all these incredible people that want to just share their work and information.
Well, this was incredible. I love talking to you all, and also learning about the passion you have. I mean, you can tell each of you are so passionate about what you do, and I think it's really amazing. And I love that it all ties back to Wisconsin. So Thank you so much for your time. And everybody, thank you so much for tuning in to this bonus podcast. We will see you next week.
Today's episode of The Cabin was hosted by Andrea Belke and Megan Christian and produced by Andrea Belke. Audio engineering and video teasers by Nick Cardarella and Megan Christian, with social media by Megan Christian. Production support by Gavin McLean. The Cabin is a production brought to you by Discover MediaWorks. To learn more, head to discovermediaworks.com and don't forget to leave a review.